Welcome to the Chicago Bears Podcast, a presentation of ESPN Chicago, Chicago's home for sports. Here's your host, Pat, the designer.
I love doing these weeks where we just get to focus on one team that we specifically hate and for what reason. But Courtney has hit us with a little bit of information that I thought was valid information to bring to the podcast. Shout out to EO for bringing this topic up as well. The Packers, as much as the Bears look at the Packers as rivalries, do not look at the Chicago Bears as their biggest rival. You have said that it's a possibility that Minnesota is probably the Packers' biggest rival as of right now. Is that the point that you're making here?
No, yeah, absolutely. And no one will argue that because historically speaking, Bears Packers is always going to be the draw because of the brand recognition, because you had two quarterbacks for Green Bay for the better course of 30 years who dominated the rivalry. Aaron Rodgers had a 24-5 record against the Chicago Bears. Those games were always in prime time. Sunday Night Football was like the spot that was reserved for some reason for that rivalry. And I tend to think a lot of that is probably, I wouldn't say pressure, but probably some influence from, ownership in not just the Bears, but like owners of the like high-powered, teams, the charter franchises who want to make sure to preserve old rivalries and the rivalries that came into, brought the NFL into existence. But Bears Packers has been surpassed in a big way, especially within the last 10, 15 years by Packers Vikings. I don't think there's many Packers fans. I don't think there's many Vikings fans, but like taking the one team that's involved in both rivalries, I don't think there's many Packers fans who are going to tell you, oh yeah, that Bears game is one that they look forward to every year and expect like big things, because frankly, Chicago's won twice since 2015. They've been swept in this era, the 2020s. Like they have been, they're 6-0 against the Chicago Bears. You go back to 2018, the second game of the year, or second game of the two times that they played.
Hold up, now don't Mitch got to win?
Yeah, 24-23 in 2018.
Okay,
so that's the only.
Oh, dang,
and that was a close game. That was the latest.
Yeah, you said just in the 20s.
Yeah, so like that, and that's 2018. Before that, you have to go back to 2015 when they won. I don't know if that was like the last game of the year because they played on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
Regardless, it just isn't as much of a rivalry right now because it has been so lopsided. The whole idea of a rivalry is that I'm trying to prevent you from beating me because there's there's a personal element to it.
Yeah.
The Bears have been blown out of the water by the Packers for a long time. And it's been so lopsided where the quarterback advantage that Green Bay had was just so astronomical that it wasn't ever something that the Bears could get to and, to try to even it out. But I think it's telling, again, Bears Packers is to the Bears fan base, it will always be, I think they will always look at it and hold it in higher regard than the Packers fans do.
Yeah.
Until it flips. And what was it? Preston Smith, when he got to Green Bay, when he was talking about, wasn't it him who said something about like the Bears Packers rivalry and like that he didn't consider it a rivalry?
Yeah.
And I think that's some trash talk, but there's also probably some truth to it too. When you've been on the winning side of this for so many years and it doesn't feel like these games are close. I mean, take a look at the first game last year, the 28-19 scores closer than it indicates.
Than that game was, yeah.
And 27-10, the second game when it was at Soldier Field. These games aren't close. When the game's over by halftime, it doesn't feel like a rivalry because it's not. Because the other team's owning you. And of course, we all know about the Aaron Rodgers, the I own you thing that he yelled to Bears fans at Soldier Field. He had a point. It was very valid. Now, we'll see with the first game of the year being Bears Packers if that can flip, because it is a new era. And now the Bears have a perfect opportunity against a team that doesn't have number 12 playing for it to to jump out to a different start, a better start in this new era of Bears Packers.
And I think that it hurts to hear it. I'm not going to lie. It always hurts to hear the Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre stats versus the Bears. Mm-hmm. But realistically, this has been my point on Bears Packers. Bears Packers is a rivalry, like you said, because of the start of football, the names that are involved, and it's funny hearing, like when my dad talks about Bears Packers, he talks about it as like, we just penciled in 2 wins a year. Right, like there were years where the Bears just kicked the crap out of the Packers. Sure. And over the last 40 years, it's been the Packers kicking the crap out of the Bears. And I've said that is not a rivalry. That is just a bludgeoning from one side to the other. I want this new era. This is all I want for this new era of Bears Packers. I said that I want Jordan Love to be just good enough that they can't get rid of him. Because to me, that means that there are competitive games back and forth. That means there's something to fight for. That means that there's something to argue about. There's not much. All I got for you is that Rex Grossman and Aaron Rodgers have the same amount of NFC championship games, which is a wild stat to throw out there when you really think about it. But like, or I should say NFC championship wins. But it's one of those things where, to me, in my lifetime, I've hated the Packers forever, and I've just hated them because, like, every time we're on prime time, I know this is going to be embarrassing tomorrow. I can see it. I can see how this is going to go. Like, I was talking to Lance yesterday, and I was like, I forgot how bad you guys actually beat the Packers sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like, when they opened up the 2006 season, and it was like 26-0, I was like, that was a dream. Like, I didn't even remember that being real because I was like, we can't beat Brett Favre like that. But it's one of those things where this isn't a rivalry. This has been a bludgeoning. And I'm just hoping that this side of it is now going to be more of a rivalry. And when I say rivalry, I mean more competitive. Yeah.
And getting Rodgers out of the division, of course, when that news broke in March, or April, that was news to every Bears fan's ears because finally it felt like, okay, there is a chance to make this a level playing field. We have not seen Jordan Love, and he could be better than most people think. I know that there's still this element of mystery when it comes to the Packers quarterback because he's been there since 2020. We've seen him start 1 or 2 games, couple relief outings. I mean, what he did against the Eagles this last year is what stands out to me when Rodgers got hurt after, early on in the game. Yeah. Now you have a chance where you can realistically look at the way your roster stacks up versus the way their roster stacks up and say there is a positional advantage here. There might be one here for the Packers, might be one here for the Bears, but you don't have the quarterback position anymore in this glaring, wow, they are just so much better than the Chicago Bears because you have a future Hall of Famer playing that position on the other team. Yeah. I still if I'm looking at this roster, I still think about like how many like first rounders they have on defense, whether it's Kenny Clark, whether it's Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, Rashawn Gary, Jair Alexander, Darnell Savage, like the list goes on and on and on, Eric Stokes. So like you look at that, and you say, well, how could they possibly, how can the Bears possibly, match up to that? And they might not this year, but eventually at least it makes it easier when like you get the hardest position to have, to master at quarterback when you have such a discrepancy between talent, between experience, age, whatever. Yeah. Now it feels like, okay, well, maybe they can take advantage of other areas to right the ship, at least in terms of, from Chicago's perspective, of how this rivalry looks and what it could look like in 2023 when there's been a very significant changing of the guard.
Yeah. And here's the weird part, right? Like it feels like it flipped. Right? Like you look at the Packers defense, you're like, name, love it. And then I just look at the Bears offense, I'm like, Justin Fields. Right? Like that to me, now he's got to do it. Like prove me right on this one. But that feels like the Bears coming in with Lance Briggs, Brian Urlacher, Peanut Tillman, Tommy Harris, all of these names. You're like, oh, we're about to kill these muds. It's about to dominate. And then, Brett Favre does what Brett Favre does, or Aaron Rodgers does what Aaron Rodgers does. You know what I mean? It feels like it's again the flip. I just need it to be a little bit more even. That's all I'm hoping for out of this thing at the end of the day. And I mean, here's the realistic part. Here's my biggest fear in all of this, right? The Bears climb the Packers mountaintop. If Roger Goodell's handing out scripts, this is the script you need to write out here. They climb the Packers mountaintop, somehow find their way into a Super Bowl, and Aaron Rodgers is on the other side with the Jets. I'm not gonna lie to you.
We all love some full circle storylines. Hopefully the scripts have not been handed out. And hopefully, I mean, Rodgers retires before that happens. I mean, we still have no guarantee that he'll be with the Jets after 1 year. I feel like that's going to be one that we have to evaluate. But yeah, I think when you've been part of a rivalry, like to circle back to the Preston Smith comments, I believe it was Good Morning Football or one of the NFL Network programs he was on. You know, they're talking about this as a rivalry. And he's like, I've never lost to the Bears since I've been here. Like when players have that sort of mindset, of course, they're not going to view it as a rivalry. Of course, they're like, when it's been so lopsided, it's hard to like drum up the hype about it, because what do? Every Bears Packers week, we're in the locker room asking, especially the younger players, what do you know about the rivalry? Yeah. How is it being talked about in the locker room? How do you feel going into it, knowing it is one of the oldest and most storied yet recently lopsided rivalries in the NFL? Like at one time, it was a lot more even than how it looks now. And you get a lot of the same answers. Like, of course, it's the brand recognition of both teams that will draw up interest. Yeah. But really, you know, the Bears aren't talking this thing up behind the scenes of like Bears, Packers, like outside of the history element. I'll give Matt Eberflus a lot of credit about that. He has been adamant about the history of this team. He knows how much that means to the McCaskies. He brings this stuff up just so players have an idea. Like, yeah, you guys have been on the losing side of it. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers had a 24-5 record against the Chicago Bears as a starting quarterback. But look beyond that. Look at the history of this. This is one that, like, when you think of the NFL, you think of a couple of different rivalries. You think of Cowboys and Washington. You can think of, you know, the Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, that's a team that has multiple rivalries, and the brand recognition where nationally those rivalries, no matter who is on the winning side of it, those rivalries are still a thing. They're still talked about. Bears Packers is one of those. But in the Packers locker room, when you feel as confident as they do, you can make comments like that because they really haven't been tested outside of a couple games here and there within recent years. I mean, when Preston Smith came over from Washington, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, let's take a look at this. In 2019, like they've swept the Bears for the last 4 seasons, they swept them. It was 10-3. That was a really ugly game to open the 2019 season. And then the Packers won 21-13. They eliminated them from postseason contention. So that was 2019. Then it was 35-16, 41-25 in 2020, the COVID year, 24-14, 45-30 in 2021, and that bad Sunday Night Football game. Last year, 28-19, 27-10. If none of these games are close, it's not going to feel like it carries the same magnitude. So one locker room's not going to be like, oh, yeah, we love this rivalry. We're going in to beat their brains out. They're like, yeah, we've done that. We've been doing that. We expect to do that. Yeah,
it's sad. It really is. I mean, Bears are now 10 games under 500 against the Packers, 105-95. And it's hilarious because I remember, what was that? Was that maybe 15?
When they won in 15.
When the Packers took the lead, like it was just like, oh God, like we've lost so much. Like the Bears lead was massive. I think that's the part people forget.
Yeah, you're right. Because the tie came in 2016. So in 2015 was when they split. The Bears won the second meeting. So they had the 94, 92, and 6 advantage. So there's 6 ties that happened along the way. I actually would love to. That's a good trivia question. When's the last time Bears Packers tied? Like tied an actual game. And then the Packers took advantage after that 2016 year, and it becomes Packers when they sweep the Bears in 17. That would have been Mitch's first year. 96, 94, and 6 in favor of Green Bay, and then they haven't given it back. But the Bears had owned this rivalry for, like, if you go and just take a look at, like, you know, all of these years, like, I think you'd have to go back to, there's a chance. Maybe I'm even wrong on this. Maybe they never, until 2017, they never. Yeah, the Packers. I'm looking right now. Packers last time they had a lead in this rivalry. Can you guess the year?
Ooh, I mean, it was like 40 years of. I'm gonna say 61.
1932. That was the year that the Bears won the NFL championship. So they went you have to go all the way back to the pre-World War II, way before the merger, pre-World War II days to find the last time before 2017 that the Packers had the edge in this rivalry. But doesn't it feel, just probably recency bias, it feels like it's been so much longer, but that's why we can't forget the history element of it. Like,
it's not recency, Courtney. It's been like 40 years now.
I know.
It's not recent.
No, but doesn't it feel like with like the recent, like since 2017, and because those games are so competitive for so many years, where it wasn't just the Packers sweeping the Bears, like in the 2010s, that like wasn't such a commonplace occurrence where, or going back to the 2000s decade, that wasn't as much of a commonplace occurrence. The Bears went to a Super Bowl in that decade. Yeah. They won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 meetings in the 2000s. The Packers had a 12-8 advantage, or Bears won 8 meetings then. Packers had a 12-8 advantage. For a while, at least it was less lopsided, with the Bears still carrying the torch as like, we are on top of this rivalry. But since 2017, it flipped, and who knows? Maybe the 2020s we'll look back, when we get into the 2030s and see. Okay, once Rodgers got out of the division, they started evening things out.
It's gonna be about. By the way, the tie. Just take a guess at the the last tie
in the 80s. I would say
1953.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, ties in the NFL, remember, they kind of weren't a thing for a while, and then the 2019 season, I remember I covered a 2018 season, I covered a Vikings Packers game that week 2, where Daniel Carlson, who's now the Raiders kicker, missed 3 field goals, and the Packers and Vikings tied that game. That was the first tie I've ever been a part of. It was a very weird feeling leaving the locker room.
That's such a weird. I don't get that.
I don't like ties. I don't really get it. I don't like the new overtime rules. Just like, find me a winner.
Yeah, I just don't get it. It's like, just play the game out. Like, what's gonna happen? Like, oh my God, everybody's so tired. That's why I said, like, you get to a certain point and you just do you go to shootout. You do the field goal off. But make kickers important again.
Yeah.
Right. That's why you keep an extra guy on the team that all he does is kick 60-yarders. That's you have an extra kicker on the team. He just kicks 65, 70 yards. That's all he does. I don't know. But hey, that's another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hopefully we're heading towards a better decade with the Bears, because I will say, man, it is tough. When you look at this thing, since 2016, loss, win, loss. Win! We just need a win. Start off the season with a win. It's Bears Packers week. For Courtney Cronin, it is Pat the designer, back at it again. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the page, and stay tuned in with us all week as we break down the Chicago Bears. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Peace.